Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Lukes, and I'm one of the moderators for this summer book club, the Metagame Book Club. And with me tonight is...
Hi, everybody. I'm Kay Novak, and we'll get started here right away.
All right. Looks like my computer's trying to send some Morse code to everybody. All right. So, we picked for this book club is Algorithms of Oppression, and this is the introductory for the first week. And before we get started, we want to thank our collaborators, which are ISTE Games and Sims Network, as well as show everyone our page. So this is our page. Hopefully most of you have seen this. You can go ahead and grab this at the Metagame Book Club. Just type that into your favorite search engine, and it should pop up, and just click on the Algorithms of Oppression, and you'll get to our main page. So one of the things that really got me excited about this book club is that this is something that some concepts and constructs that I'm interested in for my dissertation. And I'm sure Kay has a similar interest, and we'll talk about those once we get to those topics a little bit later. The first thing is the main book for us is going to be Algorithms of Oppression, How Search Engines Reinforce Racism. And then we'll also go ahead, and Kay has it up there. And then we also have some supplemental books, if you feel like it. The first one is Surveillance Capitalism, the mighty tome that it is. It is very good, lots of really great references, especially if this is an area of interest for you, if you're looking at it from a research perspective, or if you're looking for a really good one-stop shop to go ahead and get a lot of references and notes for the topic of surveillance capitalism. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kay a little bit to talk a little bit more about what we're going to cover in the first week.
Okay, and this is just the intro, okay? So this is going to be a really short video. So we're going to be doing 3 weeks, and we're going to start these weeks with something like this, like a webinar, and we're perfectly fine if you come live or if you look at the recording. And second screening is allowed, meaning you're working on something else, like your emails, and then you have the video on that other screen, and you're just kind of listening to it as a podcast. That's perfectly fine. You'll still get the information. Okay, so this first week, Algorithms of Oppression is page 1 to page 63. If you do anything with technology, some of these concepts are going to be familiar to you, and it doesn't really do a deep dive into what I would say is advanced computer science. So most people are going to be able to get the technology portion pretty easily. We have a list of some additional readings. You do not have to do these. We just couldn't, pass up data surveillance, data capitalism. So we put it in there. We've put some other articles in there too. We've also put some videos, a TED Talk, and some other short videos that you might want to take a look at while you're reading this, because I don't know about you, but for me, I don't just like reading the book. I like to go beyond the book, and I like to go ahead and find other videos and other material that are related to it, so that I even get a broader perspective of it. The next thing we're going to be doing, so for this week, instead of doing like one of those quick, fast tweet chats that take that take an hour, instead we're doing a slow tweet chat, because June, people are doing vacations. People are going ahead and people are also, if you're in K through 12, you're wrapping up the school year. So instead of trying to get you all at one time, we're doing a slow tweet chat. And we're doing 2 hashtags. And the reason is because we absolutely know that we can find you if you use these 2 hashtags.
We can find you.
Yes, the first one is hashtag Metagame, because we've been using that for the Metagame Book Club for years. The other one is algorithms. So if you put those 2 in, you don't have to use the and sign that's on the screen. Just put those 2 in. We can find you. Okay? It won't be hard for anybody to do that. So the other thing we're doing is we're also using a subreddit. And I know you're thinking Reddit. Ooh, doesn't Reddit get kind of chatty, and doesn't, don't people say rude things on Reddit? Well, quite honestly, our our subreddit is buried so far in there, most people don't find it. And we found this with the 2 other times that we've used it for the Metagame book club. Our subreddit kind of exists only for us to know, but it's a pretty good platform, and plus it takes you to Reddit, so you can see the front page of the internet, and you can see lots of other things that are happening. And so we didn't close down our Google Plus. Google closed down Google Plus. Okay, so that's why we're over. So that's why we're over there in Reddit. So we already have the 5 questions up there, and these are the same 5 questions that we'll be using for the slow tweet chat. And I just wanted to say something about if you'd like to do a little bit of exploring on Twitter. Well, we went out there and we saw #DataJustice. There's lots of good information if you type that into search, or if you use something like a TweetDeck, which is the picture that we have here. Data Justice has been covering a lot of good things. They're kind of peripherals to our subject, but things like, vendors selling schools, like surveillance platforms that will use algorithms to figure out whether or not a student is going to have an issue. It's kind of interesting. EdWeek's been covering this in the past couple weeks, so I just typed in Data Justice. A lot of good stuff there. I also saw if you just type in algorithms and sexism, you get a lot of good, you get a lot of interesting people going ahead and chatting there, giving a lot of great links. Algorithms of oppression. People haven't been using that hashtag much, but you can take a look at that. And then we've also put in just hashtag algorithms just to get some ideas. So if you want to look at the whole landscape, and kind of do an environmental scan, there's a couple other hashtags that you can be looking at to see what people are discussing and what's being written and what's being shared all around the topic of really algorithms and oppression.
All right, so now we're going to go ahead and get started with introducing some key concepts and constructs to get everyone started. As we mentioned before, this is the intro week, so these are going to be some of the things that you're going to run across as you're reading the first set of readings, as well as throughout the remainder of the book. So the first foremost is data justice. So this is the fairness in the way people are made visible, represented, and treated as a result of their production of digital data. So think about that. So this is basically how people are treated based on the data that they create. And for me, this is a really interesting topic. This is one of the definitely topics I'm interested in for my as part of my dissertation, looking at how community college leaders, as well as how educators in general, are using this data that our students produce, and what are those pictures and what are those frames that are being created based on that data, and sort of what sort of assumptions are we making about certain groups as we get more and more data, and as we start applying things like analytics or predictive analytics, or we start applying some of our other concepts coming up like artificial intelligence to try to go ahead and utilize this data to help us better support our learning. Because it's really interesting in education, is, especially when it comes to data justice, is in education we're trying to do a lot of personalized learning. We're trying to go ahead and see how much data can we collect on our students to help them succeed. And the question is, are we, how personal should personal learning be? Because we can collect lots of data as students, especially as students are logging in on mobile devices and being able to, and we actually use those, get data from those mobile devices. So key pillars of data justice are the option for individuals to be visible or invisible. So in other words, tracked or not tracked. The other piece to it is the ability to engage or disengage from technology. Is there an opt-out? How can students opt out? Should students be allowed to opt out? Is that part of, oh, good.
And Chris, I was going to pose one of my big ones, disengagement or engagement with technology. Do we really give, say, for example, Turnitin.com, which is considered an anti-plagiarism platform, do we give students the options to disengage with that or not?
And I will say right now, in most cases, no.
Okay.
It is
Okay.
considered a tool that people use, and it is considered much like the evaluation or a form of assessment. It's an assessment of originality is how most educators and administrators who would be pro who you would consider pro Turnitin would frame their discussion. You obviously would frame your discussion a different way.
I would frame it intellectual property of the students.
Yes.
I'd come from that view, but the thing about it is, I can totally see data justice, engagement or disengagement with technology.
Mm-hmm.
Are we giving students a choice in this?
Exactly. And the other thing we have is the last piece is anti-discrimination. And so this is looking at how easy, like one of the examples of anti-discrimination is that if there are errors, if there is something that is negatively affecting the student, and it happens to be false information, or maybe it's a bad data set, or maybe it was, as a lot of athletes in the news are finding out that are being drafted, is sometimes their social media when they're in high school is not necessarily acceptable when they're an adult. So how easy it for someone to clean up that data set, and does it actually remove that from it? And also the other side of anti-discrimination is, are these data set, is this data being produced, is it being used for negative things, like an example you'll read about in the book is redlining, which is banks specifically or lenders specifically not lending to individuals who live in an area that is considered like high crime, or is considered economically unstable, or things like that. So again, these are all data sets that aren't necessarily tied to a person, but the data sets around where not only just the person, but also the environment in which they live, that are being used to make decisions about the individual. And so that's also the other part of data justice. So those are the three places: visibility, engagement with technology, and anti-discrimination. And so that's the three pillars of data justice. And a really good article is Taylor 2017, What is Data Justice? So it's a very nice article that succinctly says where data justice is, gives you a good overview of it, and also introduces you to a bunch of other authors to build your bibliography if you happen to be working on a paper about it. Next up is neoliberalism. So this is thrown about a lot. Neoliberal
Yeah, in the book.
education, neoliberalism. If you're from academic education, it's used an awful lot in education now to describe our educational system. And really all neoliberalism is an economic and a political philosophy. The idea is the market is always right. And we need to free the market. So if you ever hear someone who's a big free market person, or laissez-faire, if you want to try your French out, the focus is on deregulation, privatization, and globalization, because it's the invisible hand. And it's the idea is that there's minimal government interference in businesses. That includes protections. Government should not protect consumers, according to neoliberalism, because that artificially affects the market. It's not natural. Also, the removal of public support and safety nets. The onus is on individual for success. So it's up to you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and to do everything, regardless of what factors might be going against you. There's also the assumption that for-profit is the best path forward. So a lot of us in education over the last decade have seen this with the look at, and anybody in K-12 has seen this with charter schools, is there's lots of different ways to educate individuals, but from a neoliberalist perspective, it is that the for-profit is the best path. Because you will get rid of waste, it'll run more efficiently if you're trying to maximize profit. And then really the other big thing about it is it sort of got its roots in the 1980s with US President Ronald Reagan's policies, as well as the British Prime Minister's Margaret Thatcher's policies in the 1980s. Is really where neoliberalism comes from. And so we'll go ahead and we'll shift over a little bit more to Kay and talk a little about critical studies in education.
Okay, so the thing about it is I'm also doing my doctoral studies, and mine is the place where technology and critical studies meet, which makes it really perfect for this book. Okay, because the author of this book she's using the lens of critical studies. She's doing it in information science, and she has a background in library science, which is absolutely great. And she's also taking a Black feminist viewpoint of it when she's covering this. And you find that out right away with the cover of the book. On the beginning of the book, it starts with a list of Google searches that she did using the term Black women and what she found in these Google searches. And she tells us also the story of how she really started thinking about this was actually with her nieces when she just wanted to do some fun activities with her nieces. And she went to Google and she wanted to find out what was in the general vicinity. And she typed in Black girls. And she got a whole list of things, and you can go ahead and read about it in the book. But that's why this book really takes a critical look at society, education, how we're doing technology, how we're doing Google searches. So for those of us who are doing critical studies in education, it revolves around things like ask questions. You ask who benefits and who doesn't. Okay, and you also you just don't stop there, but you also ask the question about what can be done about inequalities. How can you take social action? And we'll give you some more terms. Some of these terms come up, and some of these concepts you'll see with the book. Okay, so one thing, and she does mention this civil rights author, lawyer, professor, Kimberly Williams Crenshaw. And this is the person who came up with the metaphor, the concept of intersectionality. And that's where it might not just be gender, which is talked about gender and technology in the book, and it might not just be race, but it might be this intersection of the two. And seeing where people are disadvantaged at that intersection. So you'll see in this book, you'll see things about feminism, anti-racism, and you'll also see discussion of intersectionality. And what we put on the Google Metagame book club site, we put one of the TED Talks that Kimberly Williams Crenshaw does, where she talks about this and illustrates it and really talks more about the metaphor of this. So if you're interested, it is under viewings. And then we'll discuss a couple other terms. So in culture, learning, and technology, at least in the area I'm looking at, which is instructional design and technology. When we were doing research, there's a great paper, the typology of culture, learning, and technology that Dr. Angela Benson that got published last year, and she goes over the different ways that we can go ahead and look at these things. And so in this book, and some of the things we'll put up there are going to be critical frameworks. And one of them is a critical whiteness studies. And what's meant by critical whiteness is if you are in an area where you're in a neighborhood and everyone is white, you go to school, everyone is white, you work, everyone is white, you are kind of like a fish in water. You're seeing whiteness all around you, and you think that it's normal because it is normal for you because that's all you see. So critical whiteness goes ahead and pretty much flips it and says, let's look at what's happening here. Let's look at the culture, again, who's being excluded, who's not being excluded, and what's being defined as normal, okay? What's being defined as neutral. And this, again, works really well when it comes to technology, when we're talking about that intersection of race and gender and other types of categories that are underrepresented when it comes to technology. Now, the next phrase, colorblind racism, this is something we hear a lot with educators because a lot of our K through 12 educators are usually white women. And what we get a lot of here is, and I am definitely guilty of it myself, is that I love all my students. I absolutely love all my students. Okay? And sometimes what we end up doing is going, it doesn't matter. I don't see color. Well, even if you're not wanting to bring that up, racism is still happening. And we have to get past this colorblind racism. And this is really, it's really covered pretty well in this book, especially when she starts talking about that first part where she Googles black girls and what she finds there. So here's what I would challenge you to do. To take a term that you think is neutral, it could even be the term girls, and Google it and see what comes up on your search, and then also take a look at the go and then just click over and check images and see what comes over in images. And what also is discussed here, and we'll be discussing more, is an assumption of race and gender neutral narratives. And some of what we'll be pulling up, we'll have you reading that and looking at it critically. Okay?
All right. So next up is, in the title of the book, algorithm. So you might be wondering, what is an algorithm? Or you might already know what it is. But basically what it is it's instructions that direct a computer to carry out a function or task. And it's built around and or not logic. So you're looking for cats and black. You're looking at girls, or you're looking at black and girls. You're looking at things like that. You can say you're looking at men or women. You're looking at cars or trucks. You're looking at cars, not trucks. So this is what you're thinking of. So it's kind of that Boolean logic setup when it comes to an algorithm used for search engines. It's also used for general things that are like predictive analytics that are out there. So you're building up this algorithm, you're building up this function, these instructions that are helping you automatically go ahead and start pulling, doing trend analysis, using that data, trying to take that data from its raw form into something more useful for somebody. Artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is our computer systems that the goal is for them to be able to do things typically required for human intelligence. So these would be things like, for those of you in online learning, intelligent agents, things that look at, oh, hey, this person has not logged in for 3 days, so I should send them an automated email that says, hey, you haven't logged in for 3 days. Chatbots. So most of us are starting to see more and more interaction with, I'll call them faux humans. When you go onto a customer service site where you're typing in questions, and it might not be an actual individual who is typing back to you. It might simply be an artificial intelligence, an intelligent agent who is pre-programmed for certain responses and from given prompts. And those prompts would be your questions. So it would look for keywords in your questions and then go ahead and direct you to a preset list of resources. Also in analytics, the idea is you can just go ahead and import your data file, and it'll automatically go ahead and pull trend analysis out of that data, so you can go ahead and do some action based off of that. So artificial intelligence is there. It's a wonderfully interesting piece. We're seeing more and more of it coming to education, especially on the tutoring side. So it becomes really important to look at, again, what are these assumptions that are being made as we start creating these tools. And really sort of the thing that made this all possible is the idea of big data or datafication. And this is simply the concept that everyone generates digital data. Now, volume of digital data is different by individual, obviously, because if you're not someone who uses a lot of technology, you may not have that much of a digital footprint. You'll still have things like credit card records. You'll still have things like checks that you wrote. Basically, having worked in a business development and economic development group, we can purchase database material for consumer purchases with the exception of cash purchases. So if you're buying cash, there's not a whole lot of data being collected on you in that transaction. But if you pay with any other form of payment, then that generates data that then can be used and then can be go to help businesses market more effectively or decide where to open a new location. And so again, back with big data and datafication, the idea is this data is then aggregated It's separated out and segmented by group, male, female, age range, educational level, various ways to filter, to slice and dice that data. And then the idea is then you conduct analysis. And what you're looking for is you're looking to find trends that can then be leveraged, at least in a neoliberalist society, that can be leveraged to help improve sales or generate money or market more effectively or help better educate individuals or maybe possibly improve healthcare based on looking at preventative medicine. You meet all of these factors, so it's fitting you into a certain group. So that's why you get certain mailings about debt reduction or about changing your car insurance or different things like that. And really, the thing about big data and datafication, it's really been made possible by the advances of technology and the computational power that we've gotten in the last decade. And that's because prior to that, really we didn't have computers that were powerful enough to go ahead and actually process this information in a useful time frame. And now we can do this. Now you have computers that do this in fractions of seconds, depending on your size of your data set. So those are the big key concepts and constructs you're going to be going into as you jump into the Algorithms of Oppression book. So now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about, Kay's going to talk a little bit about the readings for this week in Algorithms of Oppression.
Okay, and Chris just gave us a very neoliberal view of big data and datafication. But we're gonna also use a critical lens. And one of the things that's in the book is Google's anti-diversity manifesto, and we put the link there so you can go ahead and take a look at that, and you can start thinking about who's developing the search engines, who's developing the algorithms, what considerations are going into this. So we thought that this was a pretty good example. It's straight out of our readings of the book, so we put it up on the page. And this is also mentioned, and you might want to take a look at this, the Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace. Now, the thing about this was written in 1996. It's very idealistic. And the author of Algorithms of Oppression does discuss this. We have the link up there so that you can take a look at this also. Because quite honestly, anything that's happening usually in a face-to-face class shows up in an online class. And one of the examples that I would give is things like implicit bias. Okay? Microaggressions. They show up online in discussions, even if they're only text-based, as well as in the classroom, in the hallway, in the schoolyard, and in everything else. So, while in 1996, internet might have been written about as if it was a utopia, we really do have to look at, again, who's being left behind. How is this affecting, and what can we do about this? And in the first readings, you'll also see some things, and we have the link to this too, but Google searches. And again, a big focus of this book is Black girls and Black women, that intersection. And this UN campaign, I think it's from 2013 or 2014, it goes into what's showing up in Google searches. And anything they mention, I challenge you to do the same Google search right now to see how much it has changed. And if it has changed at all. There is a new project, and the reason I put it on here is because I'm getting these advertisements. Hashtags show us. They're showing up on Dove commercials. But Getty Images has come up with about 5,000 new images that are supposed to be more inclusive. We put the link there. Go ahead and take a look. Now, the Getty Images, they do charge for these images. And I'm an instructional designer, so I have to think whenever I'm designing a course, like most educators, is what images are we showing? What videos are we showing? And then if you'll click on the next one, Chris. Okay, so this is an example of something that we did. I think it was last year. it was, and yes, you can play it. People won't hear the music or anything like that, but feel free to go ahead and play it. Basically, this was about open educational resources and how much money was being saved by doing open educational resources for students. Now, the thing of it is, Chris did this from his accounting brain. And, and when he did it, it ended up being some slides that had lots of numbers in it. But this was being sent out to early childhood education, um, you know, the teachers. And so instead, what we decided to do is make a 1 minute video. And the part of it that we found was we went to one of our favorite sites for free pictures, which is Pixabay. It would, when you just type in kids playing, babies, this was an example of you just got white children. So, and we're not complaining of the time we had to spend to go look for children of color. No problem there. And some of the pictures are great, and we love this. It was not immediate. The dominant culture of whiteness was showing up on this. And I will say that there's a University of Denver librarian. If anybody wants to start working on a repository or would like to collaborate working on a repository that doesn't have specifically dominant culture in there, like I said, contact me. We have a librarian who definitely wants to work with you on creating that repository. So I just wanted to show this as an example of, as an educator, if you were looking for slides to show at a presentation or develop for your classes or develop for open educational resources, it's not easy to go ahead and find kids who are not the majority white.
No, definitely. So now we're getting to the wrap-up phase of our presentation today. And here are our questions for the slow tweet chat. That's coming soon. So be looking out for your answers for these questions. So first question, based on the readings, what concerns do you have about algorithms? Number two, after reading or skimming, because we do realize people may be pressed for time and may want to skim some things, a Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace by Barlow, what has happened since 1996? I feel like this should be like Jeopardy. Should give them the answers they should ask us. They should have to write the question. Number three, how might your search results be biased? That's when you read the first chapter, you'll have a really good answer for that. What concepts from this week's readings, Algorithms of Oppression, or slides was most impactful for you? And last but not least, what do you want to know more about? So we'll be listening and we'll be watching and responding in the tweet chat. And remember, we're going to have this little tweet chat, and also feel free to join the Reddit as well. If that's a more preferred method for you, we'll be looking in both locations, and we're always, like most academics and most doctoral students, we're more than happy to talk to people about our constructs and about looking at education as well as these books. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next week and online.
Bye, everybody.